We're now on page 416, PARSHA Mishpatim. And it's going to be a little bit less exciting for a few weeks. We had some real exciting weeks, right? The 10 plagues, the splitting of the Red Sea, the giving of the Torah. And now it begins with Ve'ele ha-mishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. And these are the laws which I place before you. And the first problem with this is that it begins with and. Right? First thing is, we know you don't begin a sentence with the word and. It's not grammatically correct. But it also means that it's what's and. This is the beginning of a chapter. So, you'd say this and this, this, and this. Well, we didn't say any of this, and this. It just starts right here with the word and. So you start a book with and. It doesn't make sense. So of course, the commentaries tell us that the and comes to show the continuation from last week's parsha. And what was last week's parsha was the giving of the Torah. Now we know the giving of the Torah is this extraordinarily spiritual experience that man and God touch. Right? You actually have God coming down to deal with human beings. Right? He comes down to the mountain. Moshe goes up the mountain. We have this interaction. All of the Jews of the world see the interaction. Right? They're all standing there. They see this happen. They hear the voice of God. Right? It says that they saw sounds and they heard lights. Right? In other words, there was a whole confusion of the senses. It was an extraordinarily individualistic and extraordinarily spiritual experience. Right? Something that happened once in history. And then it says, and now that we did that, and these are the laws which I place before you. It sort of doesn't make a lot of sense. We're talking this amazingly spiritual thing, and now suddenly we go here and we say, and these are the laws. What are the laws? The laws of the first laws that we have here are the laws of the indentured servant. That is a Jewish person who gets himself in trouble for one way or another. Either he's spent more money than he has, can't pay off his credit cards, or he stole something and he was convicted and he has to pay restitution and he doesn't have money. So a way of acquiring money was that you could sell yourself, so to speak, as a servant. And there's a whole series of rules, which is we're about to discuss. But it's very mundane. Person gets himself in debt. What do? Well, they go to court. They have a trial. They say, okay, you owe $5,000. One way you can get out of debt is you can pay him over time. He'll work it out with you. Or if you sell yourself as a servant, so then you work for him for a certain amount of time, and then you'll leave, and you won't have a debt anymore. You won't have a debt anymore, and you can start fresh. In the meantime, while you're living with him, he'll pay all of your expenses. He'll take care of you. Everything will go. It will be easy for you, but you'll have to work, and you won't get paid. At the end of this period, you'll have had a place to sleep. You'll have everything you need. You'll have had your food. Right, and you will be debt free. So certainly it's very mundane. It's like regular laws. Any country can make a law like that. This is how the Torah says it. So why would you say that this whole story of the going out of Egypt, the whole story of getting the Torah and getting the 10 Commandments, such an amazingly spiritual experience, happened once in the history of the world, and you say, and not only that, and these are the laws of the servant. It's odd. It's weird. It doesn't make sense to write it this way. It's two very different things. The relationship of one to the other doesn't seem to be there. And it just seems to be that the Torah is telling us a message, but we're not finding that message. So the commentaries tell us that it's actually a very clear message. And the message is that just like getting the 10 Commandments and the experience at Mount Sinai is a spiritual experience from God, so too are all of these laws. That even though these laws seem to be mundane, and they seem to be, anyone can figure out these laws that we're going to discuss. You don't need the Torah to tell it to you. Nevertheless, the Torah is telling you these laws are as necessary for God to say as the 10 Commandments. They're as spiritual as the 10 Commandments. They will have as much effect on you as getting the Torah itself. Right? It was a very spiritual effect, even though these are very physical things. It talks about servants and how to deal with your land, how to farm, things that you think have nothing to do with the spiritual world. This also is spiritual. Not only are the 10 Commandments, says, right, I'm the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. You have to keep the Sabbath. You have to, right, don't steal, don't murder, don't do this. And if somebody gets in debt, you have to, you can take them as a servant. and these are the laws of it, and those are all on the same level. That's what the Torah is telling you. They're all from God, and they're on the same level. They're also telling you another interesting thing, which is most people believe that you don't need the Torah to tell you these types of laws. Do you need the Torah to tell you not to murder? You don't think society would figure that out? If for no other reason, I'm not going to murder you because I don't want anyone to murder me. I shouldn't steal because for no other reason than to say, I don't want people to steal my stuff, so I won't steal their stuff. I don't want someone to kidnap my wife, so I'm not going to kidnap their wife. And if that's, you'd say, do I need God to tell that to me? So most people would say, no, you don't need God to tell you that. Look at all the societies of the world. They all have laws against murder. They have laws against theft. Everybody has it. That's logical. Human beings would come up with this. And the Torah is telling you that's not the case. The whole idea of the sanctity of human life, the idea of private ownership, that you actually can own something that someone might steal from you, that comes from the Torah. That's where the idea comes from in the first place. The fact that where they say they define murder. So you tell me, let's talk about murder. You say murder. Anybody knows you shouldn't murder. So define murder for me. Is going to war and shooting someone murder? If somebody's trying to shoot you and you shoot them first, is that murder? If you think someone's trying to shoot you and you shoot them first, is that murder? Is aborting a fetus murder? Well, we can't. Those are not simple questions. Every one of those, you have to have. You need to have an answer, and they're not all the same. In different countries, will say different things. Certainly, everyone would agree to walk up to a person on the street and to take out a gun and shoot them. Right? Everyone would agree that you can't do that.
That's North America, though.
You mean you want to tell me the society would say that it's acceptable?
Societies that do it.
No, they do it, but they say that that's correct. Nobody would say it's correct. Now, you have societies today that say it's okay to murder. I don't think so. They might have ones that are okay to kill, and they're showing a difference. Like we say, it's okay to kill if you're in war. It's okay to kill if somebody tries to kill you first. But where do we get that from? How do we know that if someone's trying to kill you, you can kill them? Who says? Right? Someone's trying to kill you, you should run away. And if you can't get away, well, too bad. How do you know self-defense is allowed? So the Torah tells us that. So there are societies that will define abortion is not murder, and other ones will say abortion is murder. But nobody will say that the simple act of murder, of just walking up to somebody because you don't like them and killing them, is the right thing to do. I don't think there's any society like that. But certainly if there is, it's got to be a pretty rare one. And in general, the point is that everybody thinks, therefore you don't need God to tell you not to murder. We'd figure it out ourselves. But what I'm showing you is that we really wouldn't. We can come up with cases where we would have a dilemma. Is it acceptable that if somebody is on their deathbed and they're going to live maybe another 2 days and they're in great pain, that you should kill them? So they shouldn't have pain for 2 days? Is that correct? Is that wrong? So these questions are the real questions about murder. The fact is that a human being would not know that it's forbidden to murder in every instance, that it is forbidden, and where it's not murder, where it's justified, we wouldn't know. We need God to tell us. And therefore, even in these civil laws that seem to be so simple, like to not, if you have, like there's laws about the servant. Here we have these laws about a servant. You have a person who's in debt. What happens to a person who's in debt in most societies in the ancient times? They put him in jail. So how do you get out of debt? If you're in jail, you don't. Right? You're in jail. You have a person owes money to somebody else. They had debtor's prison. The only way you got out of prison was somebody had to buy you out. So if you didn't have family, you didn't have close friends, you didn't get out. So that means you got into debt when you're 20. You're in jail till you're 80. You didn't come out. You owed money. That was the end of it. And Judaism said, no, people get in debt. Right? So we have to come up with a way to let them get out of it. So the Torah says, let's come up with how about a servant? They becomes a servant. Now, a servant, right? Or we can use the more graphic word of slave. Say a person's a slave. Now, when you're dealing with a person who's a slave, you think about somebody who's abused. They're abused by their master. They beat them if they don't do enough. They make them sleep in the barn. They have to work 16-hour days. They have to eat garbage that's left over from the meals or animal food. They're treated terribly. But when we read this, if you read this section, you'll see that's not the case. The Talmud tells us that a person has to treat his servant or his slave, right? In this case, talking about a Jewish slave, with respect. And if you have one bed, he gets the bed. You have one pillow, he gets the pillow. You have enough food for one person, he gets the food. You have to make sure that there is no inflicting pain on these people. They owe you money. They are working off their debt. That doesn't make them less than you. It doesn't make them second-class citizens. It doesn't make them people who you can abuse or that you can take advantage of. It means that you have somebody who owes you money. This is a way for them to not owe you money. And at the end, everybody comes out of it, all right? And everybody's happy. He won't owe any money. You got your money's worth of service, and he's treated respectfully. I mean, that's the idea. Where would you get that from? So we say that Torah tells us this because that's the holy way to act. That's how a person should treat another person. You shouldn't do it in a bad way. So that's why the parsha begins with Va'ela. Just like the giving of the Torah, the Ten Commandments, the standing around Mount Sinai and experiencing God is holy and is an extraordinarily spiritual experience, so too is this. There's no such thing as mundane rules. It's all holy. And they're saying, that's what they're saying. So now let's look at what they say about the servant. But if you buy a Jewish bondsman, you get a slave. He works for 6 years, and in the 7th year he shall go free for no charge. If he arrives by himself, he leaves by himself. If he is the husband of a woman, his wife shall leave with him. If his master will give him a woman, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall go out without them. Right? He shall go out by himself. So, what's it telling you? If a person is a slave, he gets in debt, he has to work off. And if he's a married man with a family, so you have to take care of the whole family. The whole family comes and lives with him. You have to support them, and he works for you for free. That's right. For 6 years, and the 7th year you let him out. That's what you do. Now, if he comes in by himself, and the master decides he wants to like go into this business of having servants, he can give him a wife. And if they'll marry each other, right? I mean, it's not, you don't force a woman into a marriage, but if they choose to get married, when he leaves, it's not his wife anymore. She stays in the household. Now, I don't know if this actually happened, but the point is that when a person comes in with a family, you have to take care of the family. When the person comes in and they need a place to sleep, you have to give them the bedroom. If they need food, you have to give them food. Whatever it is that they need, you have to give it to them. But if he comes in alone, he goes out alone. If he comes in with a family, he goes out with the family. That's what the Torah is saying here. It's a general idea. But the point is that the Talmud says acquiring a slave is acquiring a master. Because the way the Torah looks at it is that you treat a slave with dignity. You treat him with respect. You treat him with all of the needs that he would need in order to live. And that's what we have to do. So it talks about here, why is it 6 years and in the 7th year they go free? Because we have this concept of the sabbatical year, the 7th year, right? Just like the 7th day with Shabbat. So the 7th year they go free, and the debt is wiped out, and he's finished at that point, and he's given this special freedom, and he now can go out and start his life without debts, right? Because you can imagine, any of us who've been in debt know how crushing debt can be, how difficult it can be. Especially, every business takes advantage of you, because if you're in debt, you're paying interest. You don't have the money to pay the payment one month. They charge you interest plus a penalty, and it keeps getting more and more and more and more. You end up working for a year, and you end up owing more money rather than less. Right? So here we have a way. The Torah gives you a way to get out of it. When a person owes money, it becomes something that can crush that person for the rest of their life. So the Torah gives you a way out. It's not a preferable way out, and we'll see why. It's a very interesting thing that happens here. It says, if you write at the top of the next page on 418 and 419, he says, V'yin Omar Yomar Ha'eved, if the slave will say, Oh, Hafti es Adoni, I love my master, V'yas Ishti, and the wife which he gave me, V'yas Banai, and my children, Lo Etze Chafshi. It says, right, then I don't want to go free. The guy says, I like it here. I don't have any worries. I have no responsibility. I don't have to pay a mortgage. I don't have to worry about the future. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to eat. how I'm going to get it, where it's coming from. My master gives me all that. I get up in the morning, I have breakfast. I finish my work at night, I have dinner. And I don't want to have to make decisions. I don't want to be responsible. I just do my job and that's it. So he says, I don't want to leave. I love it here. This is great. So so he says, what happens in such a case? So it says, then his master shall bring him to the court. Brings him to the court, right, because he's supposed to let him free. And he shall bring him to the door. He brings him to the door or the doorpost, like the doorpost here. And his master shall bore through his ear with an awl. Right? He basically give him like a pierced ear. He puts him up against the door and puts his ear against the door and takes an awl and hammer and hits it and pierces his ear here. Right? And that is a sign that he is going to be a slave forever. Now, he's not forced to be a slave forever. In fact, when he does it, this is not a positive thing, because here you have a person who's a regular Jewish adult who has the ability to take care of himself. He has the ability to work for a living, to get ahead, to be responsible for himself, to make decisions about life, and he's choosing not to. I don't want to worry about paying bills. I don't want to worry about going to the grocery store and figuring out what I'm going to eat. I don't want to have to think about saving money for my future. I just want to work and go home and watch TV every night. So I want to stay with my master. So it says that, okay, it's allowed, and the master should go and bring him to the courtroom where he tells the Beis Din, he tells the Jewish court, this is going to happen, and then they do the ritual. You put him up against the door, you put a hole with an awl into his ear, and that is a sign that he is a slave to this master forever. And that's where the man chose. So everybody asks this question, what is this idea of putting a hole in his ear? What does it have to do with what's going on? And they could have said, just cut off a toe or put a tattoo on him. There's a lot of things you could do. Why do they do this? So the commentaries say, there's a very interesting Rashi. Let's see. So rather than reading it out, so Rashi tells us, the ear that heard at Sinai, that I am the Lord your God, and I am your master, you will be servants to me, has chosen to take another master. Right? God says, right, I took you out of Egypt, you took my Torah, right, you are responsible to me, God says, right? You took my Torah, you have my Torah. The Torah says you have 613 commandments. That means I'm the master, and you are working for me. You don't want me to be your master. You want to have one of my other servants be your master. That's what you want. It said, so the ear that heard at Sinai that I am your master is now going to get the hole in it, because it's clearly he didn't listen. He didn't listen. All right, what kind of a person wants a life like that? But there are people who want a simple life. I don't want anything else. And that person wasn't listening. So there's a lot of questions about this. For instance, what does it mean that they weren't listening? Everybody was at Sinai, and they heard it. So they're telling you, it's not that he wasn't listening. There's a difference between listening and hearing. One is passive, one is active. Now it's not possible really to be in a room with somebody, to have normal hearing, and if someone speaks that you don't hear the noise. Right? The noise you'll hear a noise, but if you're concentrating on a book, you might not necessarily know what they're saying, right? So there's so you know that you could be reading and that person is talking. You hear it, but you're not listening. It's not entering into you. So that's what it means here. Certainly a person was at Sinai. The 10 Commandments were said. It says in there that you're a servants to me because I took you out of Egypt. So what does it mean? The ear that heard it, I'm going to do this. He's saying that the ear, it left it in the ear. He should have allowed it to enter into his brain. In other words, he should have listened. He didn't listen. He didn't take it to heart. He didn't think about what I said. The words came in, fine, I don't care. I want to be a slave. And therefore, they do something to his ear. So you say, well, if that's the case, then they should have found a way to put a hole in his brain, not his ear. His brain is the problem, because he didn't think it through. Not his ear. It entered his ear. So it's saying but that is the point. When people hear things that they don't want to hear, right? If you're a smoker, and every time you pick up your cigarettes, you got a picture of somebody with lung cancer on it, and you see a diseased lung. Right? That should encourage you not to smoke, but it doesn't. If somebody smokes, that's not going to stop them from smoking. Why? Because they don't take it to heart. They look at it. After a while, they don't even look at it anymore. They don't even notice it. Or you'll notice sometimes people who fluctuate in weight a lot, that when they've lost weight, they'll look at themselves in the mirror. When they gain weight, you'll notice that they look away from the mirror when they walk by. They don't look. It's a very common psychological reality that they'll walk by a mirror and they'll always look away because they don't want to see themselves. Do they know they're overweight? They know they're overweight. They see it. They know it. But yet they don't want to remind themselves. Why? Because they're not allowing these thoughts to enter into their brain. They're hearing it, but if we really listened to everything we hear, we'd be perfect. Right? We would all be working out. We would all be physically fit. We would all be studying. We would all be growing in every way that we could. And so how come we're not? Because there aren't too many nations of people or religions in the world that do what we do. Now you imagine how many nations do you have in the world that the people, adults, get together at night and they go to hear a rabbi or anybody tell them, you have to watch how you talk to people. You shouldn't talk badly about people, and you shouldn't spread rumors about people. How many societies do such a thing? Right? They don't. Okay, the idea of gossip is not considered anything wrong with it. Libel could be wrong, but gossip is not wrong. With us, it is. We consider it wrong. Okay, so here we are, a group of people who understand that speaking badly about other people is wrong. But do we do it? Yeah, we do it. So how can that be? How can it be that we do it if we know we shouldn't do it? It's because we're not hearing it. It's coming into our ear, but it's not entering into our brain. It's not affecting us in a deeper way. And that's what it means here. The words of the Torah entered into his ear, and it says, you don't need a master. I'm your master, and I'm giving you the freedom to live your life. Why do you want to take another master? Because you don't want to make reasonable decisions? You don't want to decide who you're going to marry? You don't want to decide where to send your kids to school? You don't want to decide what kind of car to have or what to eat? You don't want to decide? Then, okay, that's a sad person. You'll be a slave. And so they pierce his ear to show that he's not allowing it to enter into who he is. Right? We all do that, but in this case it's extreme. So that's why that happens, and that's why they ask that question. So then it goes on about different cases of things that happen. So here it says, if a man will sell his daughter as a bondswoman, she shall not leave the leave-taking of the slaves. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master, who should have designated her for himself, he shall assist her in her redemption. But it goes on to talk about all different types of people who might be sold into slavery. Like what if a man says, okay, I'm going to sell my children into slavery. I'm in debt, and I need to sell myself and 4 of my kids. Right, to different people. These are all things that are possible. Understand that just because the Torah says it, it's not telling us to do this. It's not telling you that it's a good thing to be a slave. The Torah tells you, what it's telling you this is it's telling you as the master how to treat your slave. This is not telling us this so that you be the slave. But if the person comes and they want to be a slave, you have to know how to treat them. You have to know that just because a person is disadvantaged, they're a refugee, they're uneducated, they come from a different place, they were poor and they didn't have an education that they should have, that you should treat them badly, right? Which is what the world does. Look what the world does with slaves. They're uneducated, they're treated poorly, they're beaten, they live on the ground. They're treated like animals, not like people. Then in Judaism we say you can't do that. And so the commentaries ask this is the first thing you want to tell me? You just gave me the Torah, right? You just gave me the Torah. Fine. Now we're beginning the next PARSHA. The next PARSHA tells you what's in the Torah. So this is the first thing I have to know. Of all the things I got to know about servants, slaves. Why do you tell me about tefillin? Why do you tell me about Shabbos? Explain it to me. Explain to me about keeping kosher. And big things. Right? Let's talk about the big things. Tell me about a servant. Right? These guys themselves were slaves. Are you going to tell them now you're going to what to do with a servant? So the answer in this case is that this is a perfectly correct thing to do. This is the concept of seizing the moment. Here Hashem realizes that the Jewish people were slaves. They were slaves. They know what it feels like to be a slave. They know what it means to be persecuted, to be forced to work 20 hours a day, to have to sleep in the field like an animal. They know what it's like to be beaten and you can't do anything about it. The Jews knew this. They lived through this. And while they're still carrying that feeling and that emotion within them, God says, this is how you treat your servant. This is how you treat your slave. You know what it's like to be treated badly. So you treat your slave correctly. So it's perfectly appropriate that he tells us this right away at the beginning of the Torah, because God wants us to use the feelings that we have as slaves to understand how to treat slaves. Now that you went through it, you'll understand it. That's why he says it in this way at this point, because of all of the things, it's such an odd thing to begin with. And then it goes into, as we go into 420 and 421, other things that a person does that they might get the death penalty for. Now the idea is here, this whole idea of these rules, these are now rules of legislation. This is like a nation, a sovereign nation creates its own laws. We have laws. You want to live in our country? These are the laws of our country. And if you go to, let's say, Europe, insider trading is legal. You go to America, it's not legal. So you want to be an American, you can't do insider trading. You want to live in Europe, you can do insider trading. Right? Each country has its own laws. So here the Torah is telling us these are laws. So it says, if a person strikes his father or his mother, he should be killed. A person kidnaps a man and sells him, and he is found to have been in his power, he shall be put to death. One who curses his father or mother shall be put to death. Right, and it goes on. So let's understand what they're talking about. First thing is that the Torah does have many occasions where a person does something wrong, and they're killed for it. Right? In other words, capital punishment is allowed. However, we have to understand, how did the rabbis, understanding this, using the Talmud, how did they see this idea of people being killed? So we have a famous statement from Rabbi Akiva that says, if I was the head of the court, in my time when I'm head, there wouldn't be one death in 70 years. Not one person would be put to death in 70 years. And then it says, well, if it was up to me, another rabbi says, nobody would ever be put to death. So how is that possible? The Torah says here, if a person kidnaps somebody, he'll be put to death. People did things wrong. So why does he say they won't put him to death? You want to make anarchy? You can kill people and nothing's going to happen? So the rabbis understood the following. We live in a free society here in Canada. And if I decide that I'm going to rob a bank and I don't get caught, then what we say, I got away with it. I got away with it. I went into the bank, I stole the money, I got the money, I wait 6 months, I start spending the money. I didn't get caught, I got away with it. So now I have $1 million in cash and I can live my life with it. In Judaism we say that such a scene will never happen. If a person goes and robs a bank and takes the money, he's got caught. What does that mean? God caught him. God caught him. As soon as he does it, God knows he did it. God caught him. Now, he will be punished for this. In the sort of the world to come, after he dies, he will be responsible, right? And he will be punished for what he did. If he's lucky, he's going to get caught by the authorities here, then he'll be punished here. But if he's not fortunate, he's going to, quote, get away with it, and he'll be punished by God later. Being punished by God after we die is much more severe than any punishment we can have here. So if they're going to be punished here, it's actually better for them. So even if the law is that they have to be killed, it's better for them to be killed here than to have to pay that price in the world to come. Because here you can only have as much pain as your body lets you have. Right? You can't. Your body only has the ability to feel so much pain, and then you die. In the world to come, you're a spirit. There is no boundaries. Right? Pleasure is enormous. Pain is enormous because here your body limits things. You can only feel so much pleasure. How much pleasure can you feel at one moment? There's only so much. How much pain can you feel at one moment? It can be an enormous amount, but it's only so much. And at a certain point, the pain becomes to a point where you die. Right? It only goes so far. But in the spiritual world, it's endless. So if a person is going to do something wrong and they get caught in this world, that's actually a blessing. It's better to get caught here than in the world to come. Of course, there's a better way to deal with it, which is to repent. And then you don't get punished at all. Right? And you live a better life because of it. But I'm talking about a case where you don't. So here you have all of these cases of murder. So the rabbis say, in my time, no one's going to get convicted of murder. Why? Because you lose the chance to repent. You're dead. So we want people to repent. God doesn't want to kill the sinners. God wants to kill sin. He wants the sinners to stop sinning. He doesn't want to kill them. But the law allows for it if it's necessary. And one thing is that the rabbis never want it to happen that the wrong person's convicted. That's a very important thing. It happens here quite often. Right now with DNA, they're finding out all these people that they convicted that were wrong. right? So in Jewish law, they don't want this to happen. So I'm going to give you a scene of what happens. Imagine this scene. You're standing on the street, and a man runs by, and he screams, "Help me! He's going to kill me!" And he turns the corner. As soon as he turns a corner, another man runs by with a knife, and he's running after the first man, and he's saying, "Get out of my way! I have to kill him." And he turns the corner, and you run after them, and you see the man standing with a bloody knife over another man on the ground, and that man's dead. You just saw him alive a second ago. He ran by you and he told you, "That guy's going to kill me." And the second guy says, "I'm going to kill him," but you didn't see it. It just happens. So in Canadian law, you have a lot of evidence. Right? You've got circumstantial evidence. You have the admission. The person says, "I'm going to kill him." The other person says, "He's going to kill me." You have a witness on the scene who sees the man holding the murder weapon. It's bloody. He's standing right over the other person. So I would say that in Canada, it's a pretty good chance he'll be convicted. And in the Torah, he would not be convicted ever for this. Because, number one, we're going to do the same scene in a way where he'll be convicted, the Jewish law. So here you have two people standing on the street, not one, because one person is not sufficient for witnesses. You have to have two. That, as we know, that the worst type of witness is an eyewitness. Everyone knows, right? This famous story, like, I'll have somebody run in here, right, and grab one of your purses and run out. And I'll ask you, "Okay, what did he look like?" One person tells me he's black, another one person says he's white, he's wearing a blue shirt, he's wearing a red shirt. We see things, and we don't necessarily see what really was. Police will tell you the worst witnesses are eyewitnesses. So the first thing Jewish law says, you need two. You need two eyewitnesses. Not only that, they can't be related to each other, or to the victim, or to the criminal. No, you can't. Why? Because then, if you're related to anyone like that, there's a good reason that you lie. Not you will, but you could. It's reasonable to think that if the person who is the criminal is your brother, you're going to say, "He didn't kill anybody. He was dead when we got here," because you don't want your brother convicted. So you can't be related to each other or to anybody else in this immediate scene. That's next. So now you've got two guys not related to each other or to anyone else. Next thing is, when the first guy runs by and says, "Help, he's going to kill me," you're supposed to help. Right? There's a responsibility to help. So let's say you can't help. So the next guy comes by and says, "I'm going to get out of my way, you're going to kill him." So your responsibility as a part of the community and the witness is to stop him and say, "Do you know that it is against the Torah to murder someone? And if you murder someone, you are going to be put to death?" And he says back to you, "Yes, and I don't care." Then you've done the next step to bring him closer to being killed. The witnesses have to warn him, "This is going to happen if you do this." He has to acknowledge that he heard it, right? "Yes, I don't care." And then he goes, and then he would kill him. The next point is, you have to see him do it. You have to actually see him kill the person. If you don't see him kill the person, then you didn't see anything at all. So therefore, if you don't have all of those things, two witnesses who are not related to each other or anybody else in the story, they have to see the victim and then see the criminal. They have to warn the criminal that what he's doing is wrong. The criminal has to acknowledge that it's wrong and he doesn't care. And then they have to see him do it. And then you go to court. And then the witnesses are interrogated by the rabbis. And if the rabbis in the end say that they believe this, and one way that they wouldn't believe it is if they tell the exact same story, because no two people tell the exact same story unless they conspire. So they go through it. In the end, the rabbis will vote. Right, is this person guilty or not? If all of the rabbis say he's guilty, he goes free. Because it's not possible that everybody would believe it. That's an assumption that there was a conspiracy. If some say he's guilty and some say he's innocent, then whatever the majority is what we follow. So what are we saying? We're saying that the court system is not the primary way of stopping crime, because it's very rare that someone's going to get convicted. Right? It's very rare. In the case of a murder, it's very rare. A life and death situation. However, that's only because we believe you already got caught. God already caught you. You are going to be punished. You want to have a less punishment? Then you'll be lucky if we catch you, because we can only kill you. That's all we can do. But the pain that God can inflict upon you for killing someone is much, much worse. So therefore, you'd be fortunate. So we look at the legal system in a totally different way than the Canadian or Americans or others look at the legal system. Now that's in light, we're talking about capital punishment. It's not the same with financial matters and so forth, but when you're talking about life and death, we're this strict. And that's why you could have a rabbi say, if I was in charge of the court, you'd have one person in 70 years, which means nobody, right? Because he's not going to be the head of the court for 70 years. Yeah.
Right. Like, let's say, okay, you say the person's not caught, but he lives for years and supposedly like the murderer, right? Or you see people that around that you think are cruel or cheating or evil, right? And they live to a long age, and they might be happy all those years,
right?
And they've done so much cruelty along the way. How do you look at that?
Well, it's a discussion on its own, was why bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. All I can say to you simply, although it's much more of a discussion, is that God pays his debts. If a person, and that everybody that you know, not one of them is all bad or all good. And therefore, even a bad person who you consider evil has done some good, and God pays his debts. So maybe he'll pay, just like pain is much worse in the world to come, pleasure is much better in the world to come. So perhaps God is paying him for whatever good he's done now, so that in the world to come he's going to get his for how he lived. You and I are only going to see how he is now. We're going to say, look at this guy's a criminal, and he's living like a king.
Yeah.
Right? But that's only right now, because we have a very short vision. But God has a much further vision, and he sees further on. That's just a simple, short answer, but it's a whole discussion. So so here we have all of these things of murder. So when you hear from people and they say, oh, the Old Testament is as a vengeful God, and it's bloody, and they used to kill people, right? They kill people so rarely in Jewish history, according to this, that it's almost non-existent. So for when people say those things, they're ignorant. The next thing is it talks about certain ways of killing people, and one of them was stoning. And stoning is also very misunderstood. When you see other religions and they stone people, they take somebody and they throw stones at them. That's what they do. They throw stones until the person dies. You keep hitting them and hitting them and hitting them with stones until they die. This happens today in some of the Muslim countries. You have this idea. You had it in America, right, with witches. They had the witches. They used to stone the witches or drown the witches, but they stoned them also, which means you basically beat them to death with rocks. So what is stoning when the Torah talks about? So the first thing is the Torah says that just because a person did something wrong and they're guilty and they have to pay for it does not mean that you have to torture them. They have to die, but you don't have to make them, you don't have to go out of your way to make it worse for them. So the first thing they would do is they would get the person drunk so that they hardly feel anything. And then they didn't throw stones at them until they died. They'd throw them off a cliff so that they would die instantaneously. And then a stone would be thrown after that. And that was basically stoning. It's not at all the type of stoning that you see in Saudi Arabia, or the type of stoning that they did in the United States or in Europe. They think it's the same type of stoning, but they're just making it up. What they do, you don't find in the Torah. It doesn't say that. The Torah doesn't say what I said either. But the Talmud says what I say. Nowhere do you find what they do, because that's not what stoning means. And so we have all of these different types of death, and I'm not saying that these are pleasant, but they're not what we think they are. And they're extremely rare to have ever happened. And because it was so rare that it would ever happen, we can't go around saying that the Bible, and the people living in the days of the Bible, and God who wrote the Bible are bloodthirsty. It's just not the case. You don't see that. So when you have descriptions of the Jews stoning people, like in the first century, it's not like it's not the case. They didn't run around the streets with rocks throwing them at people, right? That's just what I described to you is what the Talmud says is what happened. So it's just it shows you something different. But we do see what the Torah considers as serious, what's serious and what's less serious. For instance, one would think that if somebody would strike his parents, that's pretty serious. But someone who curses his parents, I mean, that's not good, but it's not as bad, And in both cases, they're put to death. Right? So you see here, the Torah is telling you that there are certain things that you need the Torah to tell you, otherwise you're not going to know it. Like, are you going to know? Would we know that that if a person goes and curses their parents that they should die, they should be killed for that? Right, now again, it has to fulfill all the requirements that I said to you before. But would you think that that's as bad as hitting them? The Torah says it is, because it's a denial of the respect you have to pay to one's parents. It's a denial of all of the good that they've done for you, and therefore that's considered an ultimate insult, a humiliation to the parents to do such a thing, and therefore the person would be punished. Now the next thing at the end of this page here, let's see. You start to get even more specific. If men quarrel and one strikes his father with a stone or a fist and he doesn't die, but he falls into bed, so what happens is two guys are fighting. One guy takes a stone, hits the other guy, and he's now crippled. Right? The other guy's crippled. He's not dead, so I didn't murder him, but I crippled him. If he gets up and goes about outside under his own power, the one who struck is absolved. If the guy gets up, everything's fine, so he has no ultimate responsibility because nothing came of it. He might have to pay some damages, but it's not considered a big thing. Only for the lost time shall he pay. He has to pay because the guy had to be in bed. He couldn't work. He has to pay to cover that. And they should provide for healing. He has to pay for the doctor. Right? He has to pay the medical expenses, and he has to pay for the time lost that he couldn't work. Right? But that's if he gets up and he's fine. But what if he's not fine, right, after doing that? So here he had no intention of killing the person. He just wanted to hit him. Right? To stop. They were fighting for whatever reason. Who's right, who's wrong, we don't know. So there you don't see that it says that by striking someone you should be put to death. So you have a difference between murder and assault in the Torah, right, which you might or you might not have in a civilization. But another one that comes up is if you have it's on the next page. If men shall fight and they collide with a pregnant woman, you got these two guys fighting on the street, and they're just fighting all over the street, right? And they bump into a pregnant woman, and she miscarries, but there'll be no fatality. That means that she doesn't die. He shall surely be punished, as the husband of the woman shall cause to be assessed against him, and he shall pay it by order of the judges. So what happens is you have two guys fighting. They only want to hurt each other. By mistake, they hit this woman who's pregnant, and she aborts. Now, what is it? What did they do? Did they murder a person? The fetus? Is it a human? Is it a person? Did they just injure her like they injured a man? You know, she's bruised, so they have to pay for the time that she's being recuperating. What did they do? What's the law? The Torah tells you here that they have to pay, which means that the fetus is not the same as a person. And this is where this is the basis of the whole Jewish concept of abortion. What's the rule, right? You know that in the United States and in Canada, you have a choice. You're either pro-choice or you're pro-life. If you're pro-choice, that means you're basically saying that a woman's body is her body, and anything that's in her body or a part of her body is her decision. And if her body is growing a fetus and she doesn't want that fetus, she has the right to stop it. That's called pro-choice. I'm for the choice of a woman to determine her future based on the fetus inside of her. Right? And in Judaism, that's not unheard of. We have certain concepts like that with animals. For instance, if you kill a cow and shech the cow, and inside of the cow was a calf, right? You find out after you killed it, it was pregnant, and the calf's alive. Right? It's alive, but you cut it open to the cow, and the calf comes out. So the calf is considered dead according to Jewish law, because a part of a pregnant animal, who the fetus is considered a part of the mother. It's like that, like her arm. It's a part of her. So if you kill the mother, you basically, under normal circumstances, the baby will die also. But if it didn't, it's a part of the mother. So in the case of an animal, you wouldn't have to shecht it, the next one. It would be considered dead. In the case of a chicken, if a chicken dies and there's eggs inside, they're different than eggs that it gives birth to, because the eggs inside are like a part of the mother. So they're like chicken. But while the eggs that came out beforehand are eggs, they're not chicken. They're separate. So we have all of these rules that deal with that. In case of a human being, if she aborts and he didn't intend for her to abort, right? He was just fighting with someone, but what he was doing was wrong. It was dangerous. He has to pay. That is, that the fetus is not a human, but the fetus is not nothing either. So when we talk about pro-choice, we're certainly not pro-choice, because you see there's a penalty. So if somebody would go, a woman would go and abort her fetus just as a form of birth control, because she doesn't want to have a baby, so she's doing something wrong. She's not murdering, because it's not a human yet, but she's doing something, and therefore there's a penalty. Right? That's what it's saying here. Now let's look at the pro-life side. The pro-life is that the moment of conception, that egg and the sperm together is a human being, just like you and I are human beings. That's the Christian point of view, right? They're pro-life. The life of the fetus is a human life. It's no different than your life or my life. And for you to kill me, that's murder. You to kill the fetus, that's murder. That's what they say. We also don't say that. We say that's not true either, because we see if that was the case, when this man caused her to abort, he'd be prosecuted for murder, because he caused that fetus to die. So if it was a human, he would have to pay. He'd have to pay as if it was murder, but he doesn't. So in Jewish law, our understanding of abortion is as follows: that the moment that a egg becomes impregnated, or a woman becomes pregnant, right? At the moment that it happens, there is a chance that a good chance that if everything goes well, that will become a human, right? So what we call that fetus is called a potential human. If everything is normal, it will become a human. But if it's not normal, for any one of many reasons, like the woman just naturally aborts, there's something wrong with the fetus and it naturally aborts, right? These things happen, right? Most women have a miscarriage sometime in their life, so the fetus aborts. So what happens is that the closer to the day of the impregnation, the greater the potential is for it to abort spontaneously on its own, and the less potential it is. In other words, on day 1, there's less of a chance that it'll become a human than on day 100. Right? On the day before she's going to give birth, there's a greater potential that it's going to be born alive than there was the day she became pregnant. The potential increases every day. So what we say is that from the moment the woman becomes pregnant, if you don't do anything to that fetus, it will become a human. Therefore, you can't say it's a human now. On the other hand, you can't say it's nothing. It will become a human. So therefore, you can't stop it from becoming a human just because you want to. Because I don't want to have a baby, so you stop it. You can't do that, because it's going to become a human. And on the other hand, it's not human now. So if the doctor determines that this mother can die if she gives birth to this baby, then you would abort the fetus, because the life of the mother is a human life, and the life of the fetus is a potential human life, and therefore you would abort it. So you see that if you look at the pro-choice and the pro-life, we don't fit in. The pro-choice would say you can abort for any reason. I don't want to have a baby. I don't, like you see in the papers now, they don't want to have girls, right? So some of the Asians, they don't want to have girls. So they have a like a sonogram, and they find out that the fetus is a girl, they abort it. They don't want a girl, right? That's for no reason. They just want to have it. They just decide they don't want to do it. So that's pro-choice. We would not do that. That's not enough of a reason. On the other hand, the pro-life people would say, if the doctor comes to a woman and says, if you give birth to this baby, it's going to kill you. So the pro-life people would say, then you have to fight it out. One of you will win, one of you will lose. In fact, the baby, we hope, wins, because the baby hasn't been baptized, and you have been. So it's better that the baby should live and become baptized, and then it should die before it's baptized. So it's going to be a fight between two humans. That's the pro-choice view. There's two humans. One is inside, one is outside, and it's a fight. Whoever wins wins. And we say no, it's not. It's not pro-life. It's not a human being. It's a potential human being. So if the doctor would say this woman could die or have a psychological breakdown if she has this child, then it should be aborted, because the mother's life takes precedence. So that's different. And this is one of the references to abortion, is right here. Because two men fighting, they affect this woman. The woman now loses the child. What's the rule? Was it murder? Was it nothing? What was it? So they tell you it wasn't murder and it wasn't nothing. It's something in between, and there's a penalty. And then it goes on and talks about all different things that would happen. about if an animal injures somebody, if a person injures somebody. If it has on the next page a famous one of if a person goes into the street and he digs a hole in the street, and he goes home, and somebody's walking down the street and falls in the hole and gets hurt. So is the guy who dug the hole responsible? So the Torah says, yeah, he's responsible. Right? He's responsible. So this is a concept of what we often call putting a stumbling block in front of a blind man. Right? A blind man walks the same street every single day. He knows exactly where he's going. He can't see, but he knows. He memorized the street. He knows it's 75 steps from his apartment to the door. He knows it's another 75 steps to this place, to this place. He knows what he's doing. Some guy's a wise guy, and he takes a rock and he puts it in front of the guy where he's walking. Of course, the guy's going to fall down. It's a stumbling block in front of a blind man. Right? That expression is the same idea here, digging a hole in the street and not telling anyone somebody's going to fall in the hole, because you don't expect there to be a hole in the middle of the street. Right? So a person can't go and do something and say, what do you mean? I wasn't trying to hurt you. I just wanted to dig a hole. So who says I can't dig a hole? I have no interest in hurting you. But the fact is, he digs a hole, he's going to hurt him. It's like if you have 3 people in a lifeboat, and you look over and you're sitting in a lifeboat, and the guy behind you is drilling a hole in the floor. And you say, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm just drilling a hole under my seat. What are you worried about? It's only my seat. So are you an idiot? The whole boat's going to sink. You can't sink a part of a boat. We're all going to die if you drill that hole. So it's the same thing. You want to dig a hole in the street? That you have a right to dig a hole, but you can't dig a hole in the street and leave it there. Someone's going to get hurt. You have to be responsible for other people as well. So this law is extrapolated in many ways. Literally, it's very logical, but we say that this also applies in other areas of Jewish law. Like, for instance, if let's say I keep some unkosher food in my house in the refrigerator. I know it's unkosher, so I'm not going to eat it. But you're a guest in my house, and you open the refrigerator because I tell you can have whatever you want, and you know I keep kosher, and you eat the sandwich and it wasn't kosher. Now I put a stumbling block in front of you, right? I can't do that. I'm not allowed to have the food there for that reason. How about if I say, you can, how would you like to come to my house for Friday night dinner? So that would be nice. So, but I have to drive. I'm an hour away. In order for me to come to your house for dinner, I have to drive to your house. It takes an hour. So now that I'm inviting you to come to my house, I'm putting a stumbling block in front of you, because in order for you to come to my house, you have to break the laws of Shabbat. In order for you to come to celebrate Shabbat with me, you have to break Shabbat. If I didn't invite you, you wouldn't break it. But because I'm inviting you, you will break it, in this case that I'm giving. So that's a case of putting a stumbling block in front of a blind man, or digging a hole in a public street and somebody falls in. So we use this as an example of responsibility for each other, that we are responsible for each other. We have to care for each other. In fact, it actually tells us later on that it says that if you happen to be going down the street and you see somebody hurting another person, you are responsible to stop them. You have responsibility. Do not stand idly by the blood of your brother. Right? It doesn't mean that you have to get yourself killed, but if you can help, you have to help. You can't look the other way. You're responsible to help. That's in a literal sense, and also we can extrapolate that into other ways as well. It means that if I see someone who's sick, I have to try to help them. If somebody is needy, I have to try to help them. If somebody gets hurt, I have to try to help them. Whatever it is, I have to make an effort to try to help. Right? That's my responsibility. And we get it from the same idea. And we have here the laws of theft. We'll just talk about one other. There's many, but I think we can talk about this one with money. If you look on 430 and 431, it talks about lending money. It says, "Im kesef telaves ami," when you lend money to my people, as the ani imach, to the poor person who's there with you, right? And then it tells you what to do. It says you can't act like a creditor, and you can't charge them interest. If you take his garment as security, you have to give it back to him. So this simply, I'll tell you what it means, and then we'll go into it a bit more, and then we have to stop. First thing it says, when you lend money to my people, the Torah is telling you there's a mitzvah to lend money. That if somebody needs money, right, that there's a mitzvah for you to lend it to him. That doesn't mean you have to be stupid with your money. right? That if this person's a thief, you don't have to give it to them. You have to have reason to think you'll get it back. You can get co-signers, right? But the idea is, one of the signs of a Jew is that they lend money to each other. And because it's easier to lend money than it is to go to banks and pay interest and go through the whole routine. So we lend money to each other. But it doesn't mean that we do it foolishly. We do it. You write a contract and you sign the contract and so forth, but we do lend money. So it says you lend money to the people. So one, you should not act like a creditor. What that means is you shouldn't abuse the person who borrowed money from you. Like every day go and ask them, when are you paying me back? What's going on? How come I'm not getting my money yet? To start doing that, right, is pressuring them. You're not allowed to do that. Then it says you can't charge them interest. Now this is an odd thing, because let's say I have a business, I'm in the car business, and you fly into my city and you want to do business in my city. And that's fine, you can do that, but you need a car to get around. So you come to me, you want to rent one of my cars. I rent you a car. Now when I rent you that car, it costs me $10 a day. I'm going to rent it to you at $40 a day. I'm going to make $30 off you every day, right? And that's logical. It's business, right? Business is, I pay one price, I charge a higher price, right? For whatever reason, you buy it from me for the higher price. That's business. That's how people make livings, right? So now let's say we did it with a car. Now let's say you need money, right? You want to do a business deal and you need money, and you don't have enough money to do the deal, but you need to borrow some money. So you come to me to borrow money. I have a lot of money. Right? Just like I have a lot of cars. Instead of a lot of cars, I now have a lot of money. I'm in the money business. You want to borrow money from me. That's fine. So I'll lend you $100. You should pay me back $110. Just like I lent you my car. You drove it. It gave me $40. I made $30 profit. So now I'm lending you $100. I want to make $10 profit. I can't do that. I'm not allowed to charge interest on money. I can make money on any other thing. And you see the similarity between my renting you a car, my renting you a house, I'm making money. But if I rent you money, I can't rent you money and make a profit. That's what it's saying. You can't charge interest. So what's wrong with charging interest? Why is it evil? It's not evil to make money, not evil to make money on renting a house or renting a car, so why is renting money evil? And the answer is that the assumption that the commentaries in the Talmud says is that when a person comes to you to borrow money, it's usually that they're desperate. Because a person who wants to come to your business, your city, and do business, they'll rent a car. They need to rent this or rent that. But money, they don't have to rent. They have access to money. But when a person needs money, very often is because they're in trouble. Their bank is calling their loan. They spent too much and they don't have enough money to pay their bills. This whole business that you see on the street of payday loans, right? You can, let's say you get paid tomorrow, you need money today, so you go to this place and they'll charge you an exorbitant amount of money and they'll give you the money today, and then they'll get their money back tomorrow plus profit, right? Why does a person do that? Like, why would you go and borrow money and pay 20% interest for one day? It's because you're in trouble. I need the money today or they're going to take my car away. Well, they don't take your car away if you're 1 month, a day behind. Yeah, because he's 3 months behind. He's in trouble. So he needs the money now. So very often that happens with people. So the Torah says that you have to be careful in such a case. And there's one other thing. It says that you have to lend money to other Jews. If your brother comes to you and you didn't have, I know that some of us can have bad experiences with brothers, but let's say you didn't, and your brother comes to you and he needs to borrow $100. Would you charge him $10 interest on that? Of course not. He's your brother. You might not give him the money at all. Maybe he's a criminal. But if he's a good guy, then he's your brother and he needs money. You certainly would not make money off him. If he's in trouble and he needs money, then you're not going to say, oh, you're in debt $100? All right, I'll lend you the $100, but you have to pay me $110. So now he's in debt $110. You didn't help him at all. So what kind of a help is that? The real help is you lend him the $100, let him pay you $10 a month back, and you lose the interest you would have made in the bank, but you help him out. That's what we're supposed to do. The thing is, every Jew is our brother. Every Jew is related to us. And you can't charge a Jew interest. You can't do that. It's like charging your brother interest. And if you don't think that every Jew is your brother, then the law is coming to tell you they are. They are. You're related.